The calendars show the 3rd of January 2026. Nicolas Maduro is sitting in a holding cell in Brooklyn. But before history books write this chapter, let's make one thing clear. Removing Maduro from his seat was not just a Delta Force operation. It wasn't a political deal, either. Those handcuffs you saw on TV, those handcuffs had actually started being prepared 10 years ago. They were the result of such an economic disaster that it turned South America's richest country into a crime scene. For a moment, close your eyes and imagine you are sitting on top of a mountain made of gold. You have more oil than Saudi Arabia. You have paradise-like beaches, fertile land, and an educated population. In the 1,970 seconds, Cadillacs drove through the streets of Caracas, people flew to Miami for weekend shopping, and nobody could have believed that this dream would one day turn into a mass grave. And then the tragic ending happened. The paradise dream came to an end. The system collapsed, not just bankrupt. Your economy lost 80% of its value in 10 years. How do you lose $100 billion without spending a single penny for the public's benefit? Today, we are not only examining Maduro's imprisonment. Today, we are examining how that old treasure chest of Latin America echoed like an empty box, how its key broke in Maduro's hands. And we are conducting a forensic audit of modern history's most colossal financial suicide. To understand why Maduro is in a prison cell today, we need to turn back the calendar a bit. It all begins with the number 300 billion. That number represents the approximate proven oil reserves under Venezuela's soil. Venezuela has the largest oil reserves in the world, larger than Saudi Arabia or the U.S. In fact, these reserves should have made every Venezuelan a dollar millionaire. But here lies the dirty secret of economics. Oil is a jealous god. When Maduro came to power in 2013 after Hugo Chávez's death, Venezuela was already struggling with a fragile economy. The country had relied on oil revenues for decades, showing classic symptoms of Dutch disease. What does that mean? Let me explain it as if to a child. You have the largest oil reserves in the world. You keep selling that oil and earn massive revenues. As a result, your currency strengthens, making imports from countries with weaker currencies extremely cheap. Over time, it seems more logical to buy rather than produce. So instead of growing tomatoes in your own fields, you buy them from Brazil. Instead of producing cars in factories, you import them. Agriculture and industry gradually recede, and your economy becomes almost entirely dependent on oil. When oil prices were $100 per barrel, nobody questioned this model. The high revenues masked structural weaknesses and postponed collapse. Venezuela's oil giant, once the most successful company in Latin America, was systematically stripped of meritocracy under Chávez and then Maduro. Replaced with a loyalty test, thousands of skilled engineers were fired overnight simply for opposing the government or striking. They were replaced by party loyalists who didn't understand a thing about oil. The company became the regime's personal ATM. Billions went straight into pockets, while entire refineries rotted from neglect. The result? The giant that once produced 3.5 million barrels per day in the 1,990 seconds now produces less than 500,000 barrels. Even as oil revenues fell, public spending didn't decrease. In fact, it rose. Billions were needed to fund social programs, subsidies, debts, and military loyalty. So, what did Maduro do to pay for this? A normal government would raise taxes or cut spending. Maduro looked at the central bank and said, "Print money." This was the first nail in Venezuela's economic coffin. Printing money is an inflationary suicide. But this wasn't just inflation, it was hyperinflation. In 2013, inflation was 56%. Bad, but manageable. In 2015, it was 180%. In 2016, 154%. By 2018, the IMF and National Assembly estimated it at 130%. By early 2019, some estimates exceeded 300%. Can you imagine it? On Monday, bread costs $1. By Friday, $3,000. Prices didn't change yearly or monthly, they changed hourly. In restaurants, waiters couldn't even give menus because by the time you finished your appetizer, the steak's price had doubled. Money became worthless. People used it like tissues. At the same time, a currency siphon was in effect. The government set the official rate at $1 equals 6.3 bolivars, while the black market rate was 600 times higher. This was one of the largest thefts in history. Those close to the regime bought dollars cheaply from the state and sold them on the black market, enriching themselves at the expense of hardworking citizens. Did Maduro admit his mistakes? No. He declared economic war. He blamed store owners, the CIA, and capitalist parasites. Soldiers were sent to enforce prices. Bread will only be sold for 1 bolivar, he said, but wheat cost 10 bolivars. Predictably, stores either closed or sold to the black market. This was the second nail, the destruction of prices. The most important thing for an economy is trust. What can you do with money in a country where prices change hourly? Imagine earning 100,000 bolivars and the next day being able to buy only a cup of coffee. This is what Maduro did. He burned trust, turning every transaction into a panic. When money lost value and price controls hit the food sector, tragedy became biological. In 2016, people called it the Maduro diet. 75% of the population lost an average of 8.6 kilograms due to undernourishment. This was the third nail, using scarcity as a weapon. Supermarket shelves emptied, but Maduro's regime had a solution. The clap box, supposedly local food aid. In reality, it was a leash. Did you strike against Maduro? No box for you. Didn't sign the party list? No box. Lived in a neighborhood voting for the opposition? The delivery truck broke down. And yet the forensic audit reveals an even darker picture. This wasn't just control, it was theft. Venezuelan children fainted from hunger in schools, while the regime and its allies profited directly from the very starvation they created. They engineered famine, destroyed agriculture, devalued the currency, and then offered to feed the people themselves. This economic terror broke the working class's spirit. The mass exodus began. By 2018, Venezuela wasn't just burning, it had become hell. People voted with their feet. This was the fourth nail, the flight of human capital. Since 2014, around 7.7 million Venezuelans, about 25% of the population, had left the country. To visualize, imagine the entire population of Texas or Switzerland leaving. It was the largest migration in the Western Hemisphere at the time, surpassing even Syria, but without foreign invasion or bombs, just Maduro's economic brutality. Who left? Everyone the country needed. Doctors, engineers, teachers, oil technicians. By 2019, hospitals had no electricity, no backup generators, no doctors. Doctors were working as dishwashers in Miami, earning more than $6 a month in Venezuela. Venezuela not only lost money, it lost the brains to rebuild the country. Then came the final collapse. In March 2019, Venezuela plunged into near-total darkness. The Guri Dam, supplying 80% of electricity, went offline for almost a week. Maduro blamed the U.S. and Senator Marco Rubio for a cyber attack, but the real cause was years of neglect. Just as oil engineers were fired, the same negligence destroyed the electricity infrastructure. Maintenance was ignored, fires broke out, and the system failed. Without electricity, water pumps stopped. In tropical heat, people had no water, air conditioning, or fans. Hospitals failed. Incubators shut down. Dialysis machines stopped. Lives were lost, not to illness but to the lack of electricity. This was the moment abstract economic failure became a direct physical threat. By 2020, Venezuela became a twilight zone. People scavenged trash for food, while luxury stores sold imported goods at high prices. Maduro, once shouting, "Yankee, go home," quietly allowed the U.S. dollar and market forces to operate. The country split, 95% with worthless believers, 5% with dollars and connections. It was not a production miracle but a money-laundering economy. Oil exhausted, taxes uncollected, Maduro turned to gold. Amazonian gold mines were opened, controlled by the military and criminal groups. Gold flew in planes to Turkey, UAE, and Iran, without documentation. By 2024, 2025, Venezuela was no longer a state, it was a criminal enterprise. In the 2024 elections, Maduro had one last chance. The opposition won, but he refused to accept defeat, rigged the results, and imprisoned protesters. Sanctions returned, investors fled, and the regime lost credibility. Unable to rely on oil or gold, the state turned to cocaine trafficking. The U.S. Department of Justice now treats Maduro not as a politician, but as a criminal, placing a $15 million bounty on him. By the end of 2025, Maduro was alone. No money, no people, no infrastructure, an army that could be bribed. On the 3rd of January 2026, when checks bounced, history repeated itself. A dictator can survive hatred, sanctions, even coups, but not when his own protectors see a better future elsewhere. Delta Force arrived to find a shell of a regime, and with one kick, everything collapsed. Maduro ended up in a Brooklyn cell. What brought him down was not ideology but the laws of reality. He thought he could print wealth, he couldn't. Eat oil, he couldn't. Rule over ruins forever, he couldn't. The results were catastrophic. GDP collapsed by 80%. Poverty exceeded 90%. Around 8 million people were exiled, and the currency lost 14 zeros. Courts will convene, headlines will run, but no tribunal can measure the decade of lost lives, stolen childhoods, or empty chairs at dinner tables. Maduro fell, but Venezuela now faces the harder task: rebuilding from the ruins. The economy is not just money, it is life.